the world is changed. I feel it in the water. I feel it in the earth. I smell it in the air. Much that once was is lost, for none now live who remember it. It began with the forging of the great rings. 3 were given to the Pegaselves, immortal, wisest, fairest of all beings. 7 to the Dwarficorn lords, great miners and craftsmen of the mountain halls. And 9 rings were gifted to the race of Earth Pony, who, above all else, desire power. For within these rings was bound the strength and will to govern each race. But they were all of them deceived, for another ring was made. In the land of Canterlot, in the fires of Mount Moon, the Dark Lord Princess Celestia forged in secret a master ring to control all others, and into this ring she poured her cruelty, her malice, and her will to dominate all life. 1 ring to rule them all. One by one, the free lands of Equestria fell to the power of the ring, but there were some who resisted. A last alliance of Earth Pony and Pegaselves marched against the armies of Canterlot. On the slopes of Mount Moon they fought for the freedom of Equestria. Victory was near, but the power of the ring could not be undone. It was in the moment when Celestia killed the king, the father of Golden Delicious, when all hope had faded, that Golden Delicious, son of the king, took up his father's sword and sliced the hoof of Princess Celestia that bore the great ring. Princess Celestia, the enemy of the free ponies of Equestria, was defeated. The ring passed to Golden Delicious, who had this one chance to destroy evil, but the hearts of Earth Pony are easily corrupted, and the ring of power has a will of its own. It betrayed Golden Delicious to his death, and some things that should not have been forgotten were lost. History became legend, legend became myth, and for 2,500 years the ring passed out of all knowledge, until, when chance came, it ensnared a new bearer. The ring came to the creature Spike, who took it deep into the tunnels of the Maney Mountains, and there it consumed him. "It came to me," he said in a raspy voice. "My own, my love, my precious." The ring brought to Spike unnatural long life. For 500 years it poisoned his mind, and in the gloom of Spike's cave it waited. Darkness crept back into the forests of the world. Rumor grew of a shadow in the east, whispers of a nameless fear, and the ring of power perceived its time had now come. It abandoned Spike, but something happened then the ring did not intend. Fumbling in the dark, a small hoof closed over the ring, and it was picked up by the most unlikely creature imaginable. "What's this?" said an old voice with a southern edge. "A ring." A Shetland, Granny Smith of Ponyville. "Lost!" Granny Smith heard a voice scream, its anguish ringing through the cave. "Lost! Lost! My precious is lost!" Frightened, Granny Smith quickly pocketed the one ring and hurried on, for the time will soon come when Shetlands will shape the fortunes of all. The Princess of the Rings, Part 1. The Herd of the Ring. Chapter 1. 60 years later. Beneath the dappled sunlight of an old tree, a young filly Shetland lies, reading her book. White flowers are scattered among the well-seeded grasses, an idyllic setting at the end of a long hot summer. In the distance, growing louder over the gentle clip-clop of an approaching cart, Applebloom hears a familiar tune being hummed by an even more familiar voice. Suddenly Applebloom sits up. The realization of the voice's owner excites her. She steps out of the shade of the tree, and the light of the sun finally illuminates her amaranth-colored mane and pale yellow coat. As the cart nears, her eyes alight with excitement. She tosses away the long stem of grass in her mouth and runs off. The cart rattles along a leafy lane, pulled by a lavender pony with a gray cloak and hat. Applebloom runs towards her as fast as her little hooves can manage, careering down a hill and jumping over logs. The lavender pony slowly comes to a stop as Apple Bloom suddenly appears on a bank above the cart. "You're late," she says in her high-pitched, filly voice, sharing the same southern inflection as her grandmother. "A magic mare is never late, Apple Bloom," the purple unicorn said, still staring straight ahead, the brim of her gray hat covering the majority of her face. "Nor is she early," she continued, slowly looking up and finally making eye contact with the filly. "She arrives precisely when she means to." The two look at each other for a moment, but then break their stare as they both start to laugh. Apple Bloom giggles as she leaps from the bank next to the unicorn trotting along beside her. "It's wonderful to see, Twilight," the filly says happily. Next to Twilight, it's clear how small Shetlands are, Apple Bloom being even smaller than usual, being a filly. The unicorn laughed. "You didn't think I'd miss your Granny Smith's birthday, did you?" "So what new is the outside world?" Apple Bloom asks enthusiastically. "Tell me everything." Twilight looks down at Apple Bloom, a twinkle in her eye. "What, everything?" Far too eager and curious for Shetland. Most unnatural. The cart rattles over a stone bridge towards a busy marketplace as Twilight continues. "Well, what I can tell you, life in the wide world goes on much as if it has past age, full of its own comings and goings, scarcely even aware of the existence of Shetlands." The unicorn notices several Shetlands look up, exclaiming in wonder and excitement as her cart rolls past the Green Dragon Inn. Beyond it is the party field, where an abundance of Shetlands are busy preparing for the big night. "Ah, the long-expected party," Twilight chuckles. "So how is the old rascal? I hear it's going to be a party of special magnificence." Smiling, Apple Bloom rolls her eyes. "Well, you know Granny Smith, she's got the whole place in an uproar." "Oh," says Twilight. "Well, that should please her." "Half of Ponyville's been invited." "Good gracious me." Apple Bloom's eyes squint in thought. "She's up to something." "Oh, really?" Twilight responds a little too innocently. Apple Bloom shoots a knowing look as Twilight averts her eyes. "All right, then. Keep your secrets," the filly says in a sarcastic huff. "You know, before you came along, we from the Apple family were very well thought of." "Indeed?" Twilight responds curiously. "Yep. Never had any adventures or did anything unexpected." "If you're referring to the incident with the dragon," Twilight smiles, "I was barely involved. All I did was give your granny a little nudge out the door." "Whatever you did, you've been officially labeled as a disturber of the peace." "Oh, really?" the unicorn says as she notices a pony following the cart with his eyes deeply suspicious. The cart rattles into the small village of Ponyville, a quaint rustic settlement nestled amongst rolling green hills and large trees. Apple Bloom looks behind her, seeing excited children, even younger than her, chasing after the cart. She hears the words, "Twilight! It's Twilight!" and "Fireworks! Please, Twilight, fireworks!" being shouted with joy. Twilight, looking straight ahead, ignores the children's cries. Apple Bloom sees the foals stand deflated, watching them disappear down the lane. At that moment, spinning balls of bright color suddenly leap out of the cart, fizzing over the heads of the delighted ponies, each of them jumping up and down with laughter. Twilight smiles to herself, well pleased with her joke. Even the staring smug pony from before is unable to suppress a chuckle. Twilight slows to a halt as Apple Bloom begins to turn down another path. "Twilight, I'm glad you're back," Apple Bloom says with a grin. "So am I, dear filly. So am I." Twilight's cart finds its way outside the gate to Sweet Apple Acres, a particularly fine example of a Shetland home, a large red barn-like structure in front of a grassy hillside. The lavender pony sees a sign on the gate which reads, "No admittance, except on party business." Twilight strides up to the garden path of Sweet Apple Acres and raises her hoof to rap on the front door. A familiar southern voice calls out, "No, thank you. We don't want any more visitors, well-wishers, or distant relations." Twilight laughs. "And what about very old friends?" Slowly the door opens, and Granny Smith stands before her, wearing a deep red cloak. The look of a pleasant surprise comes over her face with a mischievous twinkle in her eye. "Twilight?" the old green pony asks. "Granny Smith," the unicorn says with a nostalgic tone. "My dear Twilight Sparkle," Granny Smith says as she embraces her old friend. "It's good to see you," says Twilight. 111 years old, who would believe it?" Twilight looks at her more keenly. "You haven't aged a day." Granny Smith laughs and makes way for her to enter. Come on in, welcome, welcome." Twilight looks around the home, cozy and cluttered with souvenirs of Granny Smith's travels as the old pony hangs up Twilight's hat on a peg, revealing more of the unicorn's dark purple mane, and trots off down the hall. "Tea, or maybe something stronger," Granny Smith calls. "I've got a few bottles of cider left, 1296, a very good year, almost as old as I am." Granny Smith disappears into the kitchen as Twilight looks around, enjoying the familiarity of the home. Twilight stops in front of a framed map, charred in one corner. She smiles to herself. Granny Smith's blathering begins to get louder as she steps out of the kitchen. "I could do some eggs if you like." Granny Smith jumps, a half-eaten pork pie in her hoof, as Twilight mysteriously appears behind her. "Just tea, thank you." "Oh, right." She again jumps at a sudden loud knock at the front door. "Granny Smith," a female voice calls out. "You open this door! I know you're in there!" Granny Smith huddles up against a wall. "I'm not home," she whispers to Twilight. Twilight watches amused as the old pony tries to hide. "I've got to get away from these confounded relatives," Granny Smith complains. "Hanging on the bell all day, never giving me a moment's peace. I want to see mountains again, Twilight. Mountains! And then find somewhere quiet where I can finish my book. Oh, tea." She quickly lifts the kettle from the flames. "So you mean to go through with your plan, then?" Twilight asks. Yes, it's all ready. All the arrangements are made." Twilight watches as Granny Smith pours the boiling water. Apple Bloom suspects something. "Course she does," Granny Smith says with her mouth full. "She's from the apple family. She's not some block-headed pony." "You will tell her, won't you?" Yes." Twilight pulls her tea closer. "She's very fond of you." Granny Smith sighs. "I know. She'd probably come with me if I asked her. I think in her heart Apple Bloom's still in love with Ponyville. The woods, the fields, little rivers." Granny Smith stands gazing out of the kitchen window. "I'm old, Twilight." Granny Smith looks at the unicorn sadly. "I know I don't look as old as I am, but I'm beginning to feel it in my heart." Granny Smith leans on the table, and her hoof enters her cloak pocket, gripping a small hidden object. "I feel thin," she says. "Sort of stretched, like butter scraped over too much bread. I need a holiday, a very long holiday, and I don't expect I shall return. In fact, I mean not to."